The morning sun, usually a welcome friend in Graceland, felt like an interrogation lamp that day. Elvis Presley, fresh from a late-night recording session, was still in his silk pajamas, sipping coffee on the porch swing. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, stood beside him, a newspaper clutched in his hand. The colonel's face, usually a mask of shrewd calculation, was tight, with a kind of grim worry Elvis rarely saw. "Elvis," the colonel began, his voice unusually quiet, "you need to see this." Elvis took the paper. It was the Memphis Chronicle, one of the biggest dailies. His eyes scanned the headline. Then the accompanying photo, a grainy, unflattering shot of him, leaving a club a few nights ago. But it wasn't the picture that made his stomach clench. It was the words underneath, bold and accusatory. Presley's perilous path. Sources claim downward. Spiral fooled by reckless gambling. His breath hitched. Gambling? Reckless? He loved a good poker game with the boys. Sure, a few dollars here and there, but a downward spiral. It was a vicious, calculated lie. His hands trembled, crinkling the paper. He read on, his heart pounding against his ribs. The articles spoke of unnamed sources close to the star, alleging huge debts, secret visits to illegal dens, and a disregard for his financial well-being and his public image. It painted a picture of a man spiraling out of control, throwing away everything he'd worked for. This isn't true," Elvis whispered, his voice hoarse. He wasn't a saint. Nobody was. But he wasn't a reckless gambler heading for ruin. He was Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, and he took his responsibilities, his career, and his fans seriously. This wasn't just a bad review. It was an attack on his character, his very sanity. Colonel sighed, running a hand over his slicked back hair. "I know, son, but it's in print, and people believe what they read." Elvis stood up, the paper falling from his numb fingers, paced the porch, his bare feet cool on the polished wood. Who wrote this? Who would do this? His anger was a slow burn, starting in his gut and spreading like wildfire through his veins. The article was credited to a reporter named Sarah Jenkins, a name he didn't recognize. Usually, the press were tough, sometimes even cruel, but this felt different. This felt personal, like someone was deliberately trying to tear him down. He thought of his parents. His mother, Gladys, who always worried about the pressures on him. His father, Vernon, who had always taught him the value of hard work and honesty. What would they think? What would his fans think? The very people who had lifted him up, believed in him, given him everything. Would they start to doubt him? To see him as a troubled, irresponsible figure? The phone started ringing inside the house, then the doorbell. It was his inner circle, his friends, his cousins, calling and arriving, their faces etched with concern. Joe Esposito, his trusted friend and road manager, rushed out onto the porch, his eyes wide. "Elvis, you seen the paper?" Joe asked, though the crumpled chronicle at Elvis's feet made the question rhetorical. "My phone hasn't stopped. People are asking, they're worried." "Worried?" Elvis scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping him. "They should be angry, Joe. Angry that someone can just print lies like this and get away with it." He walked to the edge of the porch, looking out at the perfectly manicured lawn, the security gate that usually offered peace, now feeling like a cage. "We need to issue a statement," the colonel said, practical as ever. "Deny everything. Get our lawyers on it." Elvis turned, his eyes blazing. "A statement? That's not enough, Colonel. They printed a lie, a bold-faced, damaging lie. A statement just sounds like damage control. I want more than that." He remembered the early days, the struggles, the hard work, the sacrifices. He remembered the joy of connecting with his audience, the raw, honest energy he poured into every performance. This article attacked the core of who he was, what he stood for. It wasn't about money or fame. It was about his integrity. "I want to look this reporter in the eye," Elvis said, his voice low but firm. "I want to know why. Why they felt they could just make things up. and print them for the whole world to see. Joe looked at the colonel, then back at Elvis, a hesitant worry in his eyes. Elvis, that's risky, reporters, especially the ones who print stuff like this. They're looking for a reaction. Any reaction could just give them more ammunition. Then they'll get one, Elvis retorted. His jaw set. But not the one they expect. I'm not going to hide. I'm not going to let this stand. I work too hard and my fans deserve the truth. And this Sarah Jenkins, he spat the name like a bad taste. She's going to hear it from me, face to face. Colonel stroked his chin, a rare flicker of surprise in his eyes. He usually controlled every move, every public appearance. But Elvis, when he was truly set on something, was unstoppable. And right now the king was not just angry. He was hurt. And that hurt was turning into an unshakable resolve. All right, son, the colonel said slowly. Let's talk strategy, but first let's get you dressed. We have a war to wage. Elvis didn't smile, but a spark of grim determination lit his eyes. This wasn't just about clearing his name. This was about principle. This was about standing up for himself and for the truth, no matter how uncomfortable the confrontation might be. Sarah Jenkins had opened a Pandora's box, and Elvis Presley was about to show her what happened when you poked a sleeping lion. The day after the article hit the stands, Graceland became a fortress under siege, not by enemies with weapons, but by an invisible army of doubt and gossip, fueled by the relentless media. The phones rang off the hook. Concerned friends, bewildered family, frantic business associates, everyone wanted answers. Reporters, like vultures circling, lurked outside the gates, their cameras flashing, hoping to catch a glimpse of the king's reaction. Elvis, usually a master of composure in public, felt the pressure building inside him. He sat in his den, the blinds drawn, the room dimly lit. Despite the bright Memphis morning, the Memphis Chronicle lay open on his coffee table. The offending article highlighted by his own furious eyes. He'd read it a dozen times, each word a fresh stab. Elvis, honey, you gotta eat something. His Aunt Delta, a kind woman who often looked after Graceland, placed a plate of scrambled eggs and bacon in front of him. He shook his head, pushing the plate away. Food was the last thing on his mind. Aunt Delta, how can I eat when people out there think I'm some kind of a degenerate gambler? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration making his voice crack. It's not fair. It's just not true. Colonel Parker, ever the strategist, walked in, followed by Joe Esposito and a couple of Elvis's other trusted friends, Red West and Sonny West. They looked grim. We've drafted a strong denial, the colonel announced, holding up a press release. It's going out to all the wire services this afternoon, and our lawyers are preparing a libel suit against the Chronicle. Elvis looked at the crisp, official document. It was full of legal jargon, carefully worded denials and threats of legal action. It was exactly what the colonel always did, control the narrative, hit back with legal muscle, but this time it felt inadequate. That's just paper, Colonel, Elvis said, pushing himself up from the couch. Words on a page they print. Lies we print. Denials. It's a game and they'll just twist it around again. I want more than a game. I want the truth to be heard, not just printed by some lawyer. Red West, a loyal friend and bodyguard, stepped forward. Elvis Joe's right, going face to face with a reporter, especially one who wrote something like that. It's dangerous. They'll try to bait you, get you angry, and that'll just give them more headlines. Let them, Elvis declared, his voice rising. Let them see me angry, that they'll also see the truth. I'm not some puppet to be controlled, not by you, Colonel, and certainly not by some reporter with a poisonous pen. His friends exchanged uneasy glances. They knew Elvis's temper, but they also knew his deep-seated need for fairness and honesty. When he felt wronged, truly wronged, there was no stopping him. This Sarah Jenkins, Elvis continued, pacing the room, his movements restless. Who is she? What's her agenda? We're looking into it, the colonel said, a flicker of irritation in his tone. This was not the plan. She's relatively new to the Chronicle. Been there about a year. Comes from a small town paper, apparently. No major bylines before this. A small town reporter takes down Elvis Presley. Elvis scoffed. I don't buy it. There's something else going on. She's either incredibly gullible or someone put her up to this. He stopped in front of a mirror, looking at his own reflection. His eyes were shadowed, his jaw tight. This wasn't just about the gambling lie. It was about all the whispers, all the false rumors that had followed him his whole career. He was tired of the target. I'm going to Memphis, he announced, turning to face them. I'm going to the Memphis Chronicle offices, and I'm going to find Sarah Jenkins. The colonel's jaw dropped. Elvis? That's insane. You can't just waltz into a newspaper office. It'll be a circus. Photographers, reporters, more questions, more lies. Then we'll make it a circus on my terms. Elvis shot back, his eyes flashing with a dangerous glint. I'm going, and I'm going alone, or as close to alone as I can get. No grand entrance, no fanfare, just me. Looking for a conversation. Joe stepped forward, a hand on Elvis's shoulder. Elvis, listen to the colonel. This is too risky. Let us handle it the way we always do. Elvis shook his head. No, not this time. This isn't a contract negotiation or a movie deal, Joe. This is personal. This is about my name, my reputation. Everything I built. It's about the trust my fans put in me if I don't confront this head. He walked over to his closet, pulling out a simple dark suit, not one of his flashy stage outfits. I need to blend in. I don't want to cause a scene until I'm face to face with her. I want to see her reaction without all the noise. Colonel, seeing the unshakable resolve in Elvis's eyes, finally relented, though with extreme reluctance. All right, Elvis, but you're not going alone. Joe will go with you. In a separate car, read discreetly. Outside the building. We'll arrange for a private entrance if possible, but no promises. You give me 5 minutes inside that building. If you get in, and if it goes south, you walk out. Understand? He knew the colonel was just trying to protect him, but this was a battle he had to fight on his own terms. The fire in his heart wasn't just anger. It was a fierce desire for truth and justice. Sarah Jenkins had no idea what was coming. The king was about to pay her a visit, and it wouldn't be for an autograph. The drive from Graceland into downtown Memphis felt different. Usually Elvis loved these trips, often stopping for barbecue or catching a movie. Today, the familiar streets blurred past, seen through the tinted windows of Joe Esposito's sedan, which was following discreetly behind the inconspicuous black car. Elvis was riding in. Elvis had insisted on taking a less flashy vehicle, a simple sedan, and wearing a dark suit, sunglasses, and a fedora, hoping to blend in. He was a ghost in his own city, an icon trying to be invisible. His heart thumped a nervous rhythm against his ribs. He wasn't nervous about performing in front of thousands, but this was different. This was raw, unplanned, and deeply personal. He wasn't going to sing or charm. He was going to confront. He thought about Sarah Jenkins. Colonel's brief research hadn't revealed much, which only fueled Elvis's suspicion. A relative newcomer. Why would someone risk their career on such a damaging, unsubstantiated, vidi, malise, woo? He needed to know. The questions gnawed at him. Almost there, Elvis. The driver said, his voice low. The Chronicle building is just up ahead on the right. Elvis peered out. The Memphis Chronicle building was an imposing brick structure, old and grand, with big windows on the ground floor, prodding the day's headlines. His own hurtful headline among them, a knot tightened in his stomach. This was it. As the car pulled into a less conspicuous alleyway entrance, Elvis took a deep breath. Joe's car was already parked a block away. Red and Sonny were positioned ready to intervene if things went wrong, though Elvis hoped it wouldn't come to that. He just wanted to talk. Remember the plan, Elvis, the driver reminded him. Head straight for the reception. Ask for Sarah Jenkins. If they give you any trouble, just turn around and leave. Don't cause a scene." "Got it," Elvis mumbled, though his mind was already picturing the confrontation. Would she be defiant? Scared? Remorseful? He didn't know what to expect, and that uncertainty was almost as unnerving as the lie itself. He adjusted his fedora, pulled his sunglasses a little lower on his nose, and stepped out of the car. The cool air hit his face. He walked with purpose, his gait a little faster than usual. He passed busy storefronts, people hurrying by, none of them recognizing the legend in their midst. It was a strange sensation being so close to everyday life, yet so utterly disconnected from it. He entered the building through a side door, trying to look like any other visitor. The lobby was bustling, filled with the sounds of ringing phones, clacking typewriters, and hushed conversations. The air smelled of ink and old paper. He approached the reception desk, a stern-looking woman with a towering pile of newspapers beside her. "Can I help you?" she asked, not looking up from her type. "Yes," Elvis said, trying to modulate his voice, make it sound less distinctive. "I'm here to see Sarah Jenkins. Is she in?" The receptionist finally looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to place his familiar voice or features, but his disguise held. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I don't," Elvis admitted. "It's a personal matter. Could you just tell her an old acquaintance is here to see her?" He hesitated, then decided against giving his name. He wanted the element of surprise for her to see him, truly see him, without the filter of his fame. The receptionist looked skeptical. "Ms. Jenkins is very busy. What's your name?" Elvis leaned forward slightly. "Look, ma'am, it's important. Just tell her there's someone here about the article. She'll know." That seemed to do it. The mention of the article piqued her interest. She picked up the phone, her eyes still scanning, Elvis trying to put a face to the vaguely familiar voice. "Ms. Jenkins, there's a gentleman here to see you. He says it's about the article." A pause. "No, he won't give a name. Says you'll know him." She hung up. "She's in the newsroom," the receptionist said, pointing down a long hallway. "Second door on the right," she said, "to wait outside." Elvis nodded. A jolt of adrenaline going through him. He was actually here. He was actually going to meet her. He walked down the corridor, the sounds of the newsroom growing louder. The vibrant chaos of the room spilled into the hallway as he neared the door. He could see reporters hunched over typewriters, editors shouting instructions, phones ringing incessantly. He stopped outside the designated door, took another deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. This was it, the moment of truth. He reached for the doorknob, his hands shaking slightly. He was about to confront the woman who had dared to print a lie about him. The king, what he would say, what she would say, remained to be seen. But one thing was certain. This conversation would change things one way or another. Elvis pushed open the door to the newsroom. The noise hit him like a physical wave. The clatter of typewriters, the ringing of phones, the murmur of conversations, the shouted instructions. It was a chaotic symphony of information gathering, and he suddenly felt very out of place. Even in his careful disguise, he scanned the room. Rows of desks overflowing with papers, half-empty coffee cups, and overflowing ashtrays. Reporters, mostly men in rumpled suits, hunched over their work. He was looking for Sarah Jenkins. How would he recognize her? Would she be another tough-as-nails journalist? Ready for a fight? Then he saw her. In a corner partially obscured by a stack of newspapers was a young woman. She was perhaps in her mid-20s, with an earnest, almost fragile quality about her. Her hair, light brown, was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a plain blouse. She wasn't shouting or commanding attention. In fact, she looked almost swallowed by the chaos around her. Her face was pale, and she was biting her lip, staring intently at a piece of paper, her brow furrowed in concentration. Or maybe worry. She looked nothing like the ruthless reporter he had imagined. This couldn't be her, could it? The woman who had penned such a scathing, damaging piece. He took a few steps into the newsroom, trying to appear nonchalant, as if he belonged. Nobody seemed to notice him. lost as they were in their own deadlines and stories. He walked towards her desk, his heart doing a strange little flip. As he got closer, he noticed she wasn't typing. She was just staring at the paper, a pen lying forgotten beside her hand. She looked tired and perhaps sad. He cleared his throat. "Sarah Jenkins?" he asked, his voice still low, trying to maintain his disguise. She startled, dropping her pen. Her head snapped up and her eyes, a startling shade of blue, widened as she saw him. She didn't recognize him, not at first. Just another man in a suit, a stranger in her intense workspace. "Yes," she replied, her voice soft, almost hesitant, a stark contrast to the harshness of her article. "Can I help you?" Elvis paused. He had imagined a fiery confrontation, a defiant journalist, an immediate argument. Looking at her, seeing her vulnerability, his carefully constructed anger wavered. He took off his fedora, then slowly, deliberately, removed his sunglasses. Her eyes, already wide, grew even wider. A gasp escaped her lips, so faint it was. Almost swallowed by the noise of the newsroom, her face, already pale, drained of all color, her mouth opened, but no words came out. She pushed herself back in her chair, bumping against the desk behind her. "Elvis Presley?" she finally managed, her voice a breathless whisper, as if saying his name out loud might make him disappear or confirm. He wasn't real. Elvis nodded, a grim set to his jaw. He saw the recognition, then the dawning realization of why he was there, and then stark terror. Her eyes darted around the room as if looking for an escape or a witness. No one else had noticed him yet, consumed by their own work. "That's right, Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice now firm, resonant. The voice of the king, the voice that commanded stadiums. "I believe we need to talk about your article." He gestured vaguely to the newspaper she'd been staring at, the one with his face on the front page and the lie beneath it. She swallowed hard, her gaze fixed on him. A deer caught in headlights. She looked utterly shocked, completely unprepared. This wasn't the strong, confident reporter he had built up in his mind. This was just a young woman, clearly terrified. "Mr. Presley," she stammered, her hands gripping the edge of her desk. I don't understand. Why are you here?" "Oh, I think you do, Miss Jenkins," Elvis replied, his voice laced with an edge of steel. He didn't shout, he didn't need to. The quiet intensity was far more powerful. When someone prints a pack of lies about you for the whole world to read, you tend to want some answers, and I came here to get them face to face. Took a step closer, leaning slightly on her desk, forcing her to look up at him. She flinched, but she didn't look away. Her fear was palpable. But beneath it he could sense something else, not malice, something akin to deep regret. This wasn't going to be the explosive confrontation he'd anticipated, but it was going to be a confrontation nonetheless. And somehow, seeing her unexpected reaction, her visible distress, made it even more unsettling. The ball was now in his court. Sarah Jenkins couldn't breathe. Elvis Presley, in the chaotic, ink-stained newsroom. He was a beacon of raw, powerful presence, his eyes boring into hers. Her mind raced, trying to process the impossible. How did he get in? Why wasn't he shouting? "Mr. Presley," she managed again, her voice barely a whisper. Her throat felt tight, as if a vice was clamping down. I'm so sorry." The words tumbled out before she could stop them, an instinctual reaction to the raw emotion she saw on his face. Elvis raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise replacing the initial anger in his eyes. "Sorry, Miss Jenkins." "Sorry for what?" "Exactly. For printing a lie that could ruin my reputation, for making my family worry sick, for making my fans doubt me." His voice was still controlled, but the underlying pain was evident. She flinched. No, not for that, Mr. Presley. I mean, yes, for that, but not in the way you think." She took a shaky breath, trying to compose herself, but her hands were trembling. I didn't invent it. I was given the information. I was told it was reliable." Elvis scoffed, but she saw the slight hesitation in his expression. Given the information and you just printed it? No questions asked, no fact-checking. Just ran with it because it made a sensational headline. Tears pricked at her eyes. She hated herself for feeling so vulnerable, but his directness, his visible pain was overwhelming. No, I did check. Or I thought I did. My editor, he said the sources were solid. He pressured me to get it out. It was my first big story, Mr. Presley, my first major byline. Her voice cracked. I came from a small paper. This was supposed to be my chance. He stared at her, assessing. He saw the genuine distress, the palpable regret. He saw a young woman who looked like she was crumbling under the weight of her own mistake. Your first big story, he repeated, his voice losing some of its hardness, replaced by a weary disbelief. And you chose to start your career by destroying someone else's. No, she cried a little louder this time, drawing a quick glance from a nearby reporter who then just shrugged and went back to his work. The newsroom was a bubble of self-interest. That's not what I wanted. I didn't want to destroy you. I was told it was a public interest story that your fans deserved to know. They said you were reckless, that you were in trouble, and that this could be a wake-up call. By inventing a gambling addiction, I play poker, Miss Jenkins. Like a lot of people, it's a game, not a desperate spiral into debt. Do you have any idea how much damage this has done? He gestured around the newsroom. Everyone here, everyone reading this paper, they think I'm a mess. My family, my friends, they're hurting because of your public interest story. Sarah hunched her shoulders, feeling the weight of his words, the truth of them. She had seen the phone calls come in all morning. Angry subscribers, canceled subscriptions. Her editor had been furious, not because the story was false, but because of the backlash. I was told by my editor, Mr. Davies, she explained, her voice low. He said he had multiple sources, very high up. He said they were concerned for your welfare, that you were spiraling. He pushed me to write it quickly, before the information went stale. He said it would be a huge scoop. Her gaze was fixed on his face, pleading for him to understand. I knew. I wanted to prove myself. I believed him. I swear I truly thought I was doing my job. Bringing important information to light. Elvis studied her. He saw the desperation, the naivety even, in her eyes. It was a young woman who had been used, manipulated, and now was facing the terrifying consequences. The anger he had felt so fierce and consuming began to dissipate, replaced by a complex mixture of pity and a lingering, profound hurt. So you're saying you were just a pawn, he asked, his voice now flat, devoid of emotion. That your editor gave you false information and you just wrote it down. She nodded, tears finally escaping and running down her pale cheeks. I trusted him. He's the senior editor. He said he had verified it. He even showed me some vague reports, financial transactions that looked suspicious, but looking back, they were so vague I should have pushed harder. I should have checked every single detail myself. I got swept up in it. I was so proud when it printed, and then the calls started coming in, people saying it wasn't true. My own conscience started screaming, and now you're here. He watched her, strange silence settling between them, broken only by the distant clatter of the newsroom. He had come here for a fight for answers, born of anger. He found the young woman on the verge of breaking, burdened by a lie she hadn't fully comprehended the weight of. Until now, the confrontation he'd imagined was nothing like this. And suddenly, his path forward became incredibly complicated. Elvis watched Sarah sob into her hands. The anger, which had been his guiding force for the past 2 days, was slowly dissolving, replaced by a perplexing mix of pity and frustration. He hadn't come here to make a young woman cry, but her tears felt genuine, not a performance. Miss Jenkins, he said, his voice softer now, almost weary. Look at me. She slowly lowered her hands, her face streaked with tears, her blue eyes red-rimmed, but still fixed on him. I came here prepared to yell, to demand answers, to maybe even sue this newspaper into the ground, Elvis admitted, his gaze intense. But you're telling me you were just a reporter following orders, that you were misled? She nodded frantically. Elvis pressed his voice, regaining a touch of its edge. Did he know it was false? Was he trying to hurt me? Sarah hesitated, then shook her head slowly. I don't know his true intentions. He just said it was from reliable sources who were worried about you. He implied it was a common secret among your inner circle, but no one was brave enough to speak up. She shuddered. I realize now how ridiculous that sounds, but at the time the pressure was immense. Elvis closed his eyes for a moment, letting out a long sigh. The image of the calculating, malicious reporter he'd built up in his mind had shattered, replaced by a far more complex reality. He still felt the sting of the lie, the profound injustice of it, but now it was tinged with a different kind of pain. The pain of seeing someone else caught in a web of deceit, even if they were the instrument of his own suffering. Do you know what this article has done, Miss Jenkins? He asked, his voice low and heavy. My phone has been ringing nonstop. My fans, the people who have supported me since the very beginning, they're confused. Some of them are angry. They deserve the truth. And this isn't just about the gambling. It's about trust. It's about integrity. Mine, and now yours too. I know. And I am so sorry. I've tried to talk to Mr. Davies, to get him to issue a retraction, but he just dismissed me. He said it was a hit pieces, and that all high-profile figures ignore the backlash. Elvis repeated, his voice rising in disbelief. Ignore the truth. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration warring with the nascent understanding blooming within him. So what now, Miss Jenkins? You just let this lie stand. You let your editor get away with using you and damaging my name. She looked up at him, her eyes pleading. No, I don't want to. I've been thinking all morning what I can do, but I'm just a junior reporter who would listen to me. Elvis stared at her, a thought slowly forming in his mind. It was risky, it was unconventional, but it might be the only way to truly set the record straight. Not just with a legal notice, but with something real, something that connected with people on a human level. I have an idea, Elvis said slowly, testing the word. An idea that might benefit both of us. An idea that might actually get the truth out there. Sarah's eyes widened, a flicker of hope, however faint, appearing in their depths. What kind of idea, Mr. Presley? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper, almost conspiratorial against the background noise of the newsroom. You want to make things right? Right. You want to prove you're not just some reckless reporter who prints lies. She nodded eagerly. More than anything, Mr. Presley, I hate what I did. I hate that I let myself be you. Then you're going to help me tell the real story, Elvis said, his gaze unwavering. A story of how a lie was printed and how it was corrected truthfully and bravely. Sarah stared at him, her mouth slightly agape. King of Rock and Roll was offering her an exclusive, a chance for redemption, a chance to set things right, not just for him, but for her own conscience. It was an unprecedented offer, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. It would mean going against her editor, risking her job, but it would also mean facing the truth head-on. A fragile bridge, built of vulnerability and a desperate hope for honesty, began to form between them in the bustling, oblivious newsroom. The idea hung in the air between them, shimmering with both risk and immense possibility. Sarah Jenkins stared at Elvis, her mind reeling. An exclusive interview with her, the reporter who had just printed a devastating lie about him. It was insane, it was brilliant. An exclusive, she stammered, still trying to process it. You mean you'd sit down with me after what I wrote? Elvis nodded, his expression serious. If you're truly sorry, Miss Jenkins, and if you're truly willing to write the truth this time, then yes, I'll give you the exclusive, but it has to be on my terms. No more unnamed sources. No more vague accusations. Just the facts and your honest account of how this lie came to be printed. Sarah's heart pounded how this lie came to be printed. This was not just a chance to correct her mistake. It was a chance to reclaim her integrity, to prove to herself and to the world that she wasn't just a puppet for her editor. It was also incredibly dangerous. She could lose her job, be blacklisted. But the thought of letting the lie stand, of letting Elvis Presley's name remain tarnished, was even more unbearable now that she had looked him in the eye. "But my editor, Mr. Davies," she began, fear creeping into her voice. "He'll never allow it. He'll bury it. He'll probably fire me." "That's a risk you'll have to consider, Miss Jenkins," Elvis said, his voice steady. "But think about it. If you let him bury the truth, what does that say about you? About your journalistic ethics? What kind of reporter do you want to be? One who stands up for what's right, even if it's hard." His words struck a chord deep within her. She had gotten into journalism to tell stories, to uncover truth, not to spread lies. The glamour of the Memphis Chronicle had blinded her, and the pressure had broken her. Now here was the man she had wronged, offering her a path to redemption, albeit a steep one. "What would the interview be about?" she asked, her voice gaining a little more strength. "Everything," Elvis replied. "How you were misled, how you made a mistake, and how you're now dedicated to setting the record straight. It won't be easy. It will mean admitting your error publicly, but it will be honest." Sarah chewed on her lip, her mind racing through the implications. It was terrifying, but it was also the only way she could truly make amends. A simple retraction wouldn't be enough. It would be buried, dismissed. But an exclusive interview published by the same reporter who wrote the lie, acknowledging her mistake and then telling the full, honest story, that would be powerful, that would get people's attention. "And what if Mr. Davies refuses to print it?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Elvis leaned back slightly, a flicker of a confident smile playing on his lips, a glimpse of the king's public persona. "Then we take it elsewhere, to another paper, to a national magazine. I have a lot of friends. This story, the true story, will get out. The question is, do you want to be the one to write it, or do you want to be remembered as the reporter who printed a lie and then cowered in the shadows?" Sarah looked around the bustling newsroom at the faces of her colleagues, none of whom had noticed the extraordinary conversation taking place in their midst. She thought of Mr. Davies, his intimidating presence, his demand for sensationalism. She thought of the knot of shame that had been tightening in her stomach since the article came out. And then she looked at Elvis Presley, the man she had wronged, who was offering her a chance to be brave. "I'll do it," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'll write the truth. I'll write everything." A flicker of relief and something akin to respect passed over Elvis's face. "Good," he said. "That's the first step." Pulled out a small notepad and a pen from his inside pocket. "My manager, Colonel Parker, will be in touch. He'll set up the logistics for the interview. No more surprise visits to newsrooms. All right?" A faint, wry smile touched his lips. Sarah managed a weak smile back, a genuine one this time, though tears still clung to her lashes. "No more surprise visits," she agreed. She watched him write down a number, tear off the page, and hand it to her. His fingers brushed hers, and she felt a jolt, not of starstruck awe, but of something deeper, a shared understanding, a fragile pact. He replaced his fedora and sunglasses, becoming the anonymous man in the suit once more. "This won't be easy, Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice lower, more personal. "But sometimes doing the right thing never is." Turned and walked away, disappearing into the chaotic buzz of the newsroom, a ghost once more. Sarah watched him go, the slip of paper with the phone number clutched in her hand. Her heart was still pounding, but it wasn't just with fear anymore. It was with a strange, exhilarating sense of purpose. She had a story to tell, the real story. And she had the King of Rock and Roll's blessing to tell it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of clandestine meetings and nervous anticipation. Colonel Parker, after a lengthy, heated discussion with Elvis, where Elvis firmly laid out his non-negotiable terms, had grudgingly agreed to the plan. He saw the potential, however risky, in Elvis controlling the narrative this way. The interview was set to take place at Graceland in the privacy of Elvis's music room, a space sacred to his craft. Sarah, feeling like an undercover agent, arrived discreetly, driven by a driver sent by the colonel, trying to avoid the lingering press outside the gates. She was nervous, not just about meeting Elvis again, but about the monumental task ahead. She clutched her notepad and pen, her heart thumping against her ribs. When she entered the music room, Elvis was already there, strumming an acoustic guitar, a soft, melancholy tune, filling the air. He looked relaxed, yet his eyes held a serious intensity. "Miss Jenkins," he said, setting the guitar aside. "Thanks for coming." "Thank you, Mr. Presley, for giving me this chance," she replied, her voice a little shaky. She sat across from him in a comfortable armchair, feeling dwarfed by the grandness of the room and a legend sitting opposite her. They began. Sarah had prepared a list of questions, but the interview quickly became a conversation flowing naturally, honestly. Elvis spoke candidly about the gambling lie, refuting every accusation with calm, measured responses, offering anecdotes and verifiable facts that painted a completely different picture. He explained his love for friendly poker games, the small stakes, the camaraderie, contrasting it sharply with the vicious fabricated image of a desperate addict. "It wasn't just a lie about gambling, Miss Jenkins," he said, his voice low and earnest. "It was an attack on my character. It implied I was irresponsible, that I didn't care about my career, my fans. That hurts more than anything else." Sarah listened, scribbling furiously, not just his words, but the subtle nuances of his expression, the raw emotion in his voice. She saw his vulnerability, his frustration, but also his immense dignity. He didn't rant or rail, he simply laid out the truth with quiet power. Then she asked him about his life, his music, his passions. He spoke of his humble beginnings, his deep love for gospel music, the joy he found in performing, the connection with his fans. He talked about the pressures. I fought to be a stake of his family, his dreams for the future. He was open, honest, and incredibly human. Finally, it was her turn. Sarah took a deep breath. "Mr. Presley, I have to ask you about my part in all this." He nodded, his gaze unwavering. She spoke of her ambition, her eagerness to impress her editor, the pressure to produce a sensational story, the misleading information she was given. She admitted her lapse in judgment, her failure to adequately verify every detail herself. Her voice faltered at times, but she pushed through, confessing her mistakes, her regret, and her determination to make amends. "I was so wrong, Mr. Presley," she said, looking him straight in the eye, tears brimming once more. "I let myself be used. I let a lie be printed under my name, and I deeply apologize for the pain and distress I caused you and your loved ones." Elvis looked at her, his expression softening. "It takes a lot of courage to admit that, Miss Jenkins," he said gently. "A lot of courage." The interview lasted for hours. By the time it was over, Sarah felt exhausted, but also strangely invigorated. She had faced her demons, and she had heard the truth directly from the source. She had a story that was not only a retraction, but a deep dive into the heart of a legend, a story of integrity and redemption. She returned to the Memphis Chronicle office, feeling a new sense of purpose. She worked tirelessly, weaving Elvis's powerful narrative with her own confession of error. She wrote with a newfound clarity and conviction, every word infused with the weight of the truth. She carefully avoided sensationalism, focusing instead on accuracy and genuine emotion. The next morning, she presented the article to Mr. Davies. He read it, his face a thundercloud. He ranted, he threatened. "Mr. Davies," she said, her voice firm, "this is the truth, and it will be printed either here or somewhere else. Elvis Presley himself has personally approved it." The threat of Elvis taking his story to a rival publication, combined with the sheer power of the narrative Sarah had crafted, eventually swayed him. Perhaps he saw the potential for positive publicity in a story of journalistic redemption. Whatever his reasoning, he grudgingly gave his approval. The following day, the Memphis Chronicle hit the stands with a new headline, bold and prominent: "The King's Truth. Elvis Presley confronts the lies. Reporter confesses error." Sarah's byline was there, not just on the main story, but on a smaller sidebar where she wrote her own personal statement of regret and lessons learned. It was raw, honest, and brave. The article itself was captivating, painting a vivid picture of Elvis's pain, his honesty, and his quiet strength. It wasn't just a retraction. It was a deeply personal expose on the price of fame and the power of truth. Truth had finally found its resonant melody echoing through the pages of the newspaper, a testament to courage, forgiveness, and the enduring spirit of the king. The second article in the Memphis Chronicle wasn't just a newspaper story, it was a bombshell. It exploded across Memphis, then across the nation, carried by wire services, and picked up by radio and television news. The first article had created a storm of confusion and anger. This one created a wave of understanding and admiration. Elvis watched the reaction from Graceland. The initial outrage from his fans turned into a fierce defense of his name. Calls and letters weren't questions anymore, but messages of support, of pride, of relief. His family breathed sighs of relief. Vernon, his father, simply hugged him tightly. A silent acknowledgement of the burden lifted. Colonel, ever the showman, even managed a rare, genuine smile. "Well, son," he said, looking at the piles of glowing reviews and positive fan mail, "it appears your unconventional approach paid off. People appreciate honesty, even from a reporter who made a mistake." Some criticized her for her initial error, but more applauded her courage in admitting it and then actively working to correct it. Her honesty, her willingness to put her own career on the line for the truth, resonated with people tired of cynical, anonymous sources. She was offered interviews by other publications, not about Elvis, but about her experience, about journalistic ethics. She handled them with grace and humility, always emphasizing the importance of truth and accountability. For Sarah, the experience was get. She still worked at the Memphis Chronicle, though Mr. Davies kept a wary distance. She continued to write, but with a new meticulousness, a deeper sense of responsibility. She never again took a source at face value, always digging deeper, always verifying. She had learned a harsh public lesson, but it had made her a better reporter, one committed to integrity above all else. A few weeks after the article ran, a small package arrived at Graceland. It was for Elvis. Inside was a neatly wrapped copy of the Memphis Chronicle, the second truthful article carefully folded open. Tucked inside was a handwritten note from Sarah. "Mr. Presley, I know I can never truly undo the hurt I caused. But I hope this article and my sincere apology helps in some small way. Thank you for your incredible generosity, for your patience, and most of all for trusting me with the truth. You taught me a profound lesson about courage and forgiveness. I will never forget it. Sincerely, Sarah Jenkins." Elvis read the note, a faint smile playing on his lips. Picked up the newspaper, looking at his own face, then at Sarah's byline. He didn't just feel vindicated. He felt a quiet sense of peace. He hadn't sought revenge, but understanding. And in that search, he had not only cleared his name, but had also perhaps helped a young woman find her way. He knew their paths would likely not cross again. Not in the same way. She was a reporter. He was the king, but a fragile bridge had been built between them, forged in the fire of a lie and cemented by the shared pursuit of truth. Incident became a quiet legend in Elvis's inner circle, the time the king went into the lion's den and came out with a newfound respect for honesty and an unexpected ally. He learned that confronting lies wasn't always about shouting louder, but sometimes about listening, about understanding, and about offering a hand to those who had stumbled. As for Sarah, she carried the lesson with her every day. The memory of Elvis Presley Standing in her newsroom, his eyes filled with hurt but also an unexpected offer of grace, was a constant reminder of the profound impact of words and the power of facing the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Elvis continued to make music, to perform his legend, growing stronger, his integrity reaffirmed. Sarah continued to write, her career slowly blossoming, her reputation built on solid, trustworthy reporting. The lie about the king had been a painful stain on the newsprint, but the truth told bravely had woven a far more beautiful and enduring story. It was a story not just about a rock and roll legend, but about the quiet, heartwarming power of human connection, forgiveness, and the unwavering pursuit of what is right.